Hello everyone, welcome to the channel, and in this episode of The Missing Survivors we are going to be taking a look at the 400 Days characters, specifically Vince, Russell, Wyatt, Shell, Becca and Tavia. Anyway, before the video starts, I just want to let you know that this video does contain spoilers for the entirety of the Walking Dead Telltale series. So without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so 400 Days was an interesting concept, to say the least. The idea of a DLC for Season 1 that was going to introduce a few characters that were going to play a role in Season 2 actually seemed like a pretty good idea. Already getting you connected to characters, so when Season 2 came out, you already had a connection with them. If you remember, Fear the Walking Dead later on did something similar to this with the Flight 462 web series, where a character from that later appeared in the second season of Fear, so it's pretty interesting how that was done. Anyway, it's time we talk about the character storylines and we'll go from there. Anyway, let's begin. Okay, so first up we have the story. Now I'm going to do this in chronological order, and I am going to be breezing through these stories really fast because there is a lot to talk about. Anyway, so we'll start off with Vince. So first there is Vince. In his story we see him gun down someone. We don't really know why, other than it has something to do with his brother. Anyway, Vince gets caught by the police and is sentenced to prison. Fun fact, this is the same prison Lee was going to, and the survivors in the comics go to. So yeah, Vince is sentenced to prison, and we see him on a prison bus. This is 2 days into the apocalypse. We see Vince interacting with some of the other inmates, Danny and Justin. We get some backstory on the inmates, but shit soon hits the fan when a couple of the other inmates get into a fight, and one of them is strangled to death. In the heat of the moment, the police officer shoots the inmate who is choking the other inmate. They don't have much time to dwell on this as they start to hear screaming and look out the window to see a woman getting eaten, and two other women, Shell and Becca, who we will talk about soon, getting away. Panicked by all this, the inmates want to get out of there, and when the police officer tells them they're safe in the bus, he's then bit by the inmate that got strangled and is now a walker. When the inmates ask for help from the bus driver runs off, leaving the inmates stuck. Vince then grabs the shotgun from the dead police officer and shoots one of the inmates' legs off to remove the chains that is keeping them locked in. We then see Vince and the inmate who decide not to shoot run off and leave the other inmate to die. That is Vince's story. Next is Wyatt's. In Wyatt's story, which is 41 days into the apocalypse, we see Wyatt and his friend Eddie getting chased by a truck driver. They eventually lose him and accidentally run over the police officer from Vince's story that ran off. It's then up for the player to decide who should go out and see if the police officer is still alive. The person that stays in Eddie's car then gets attacked by the truck driver, and in a moment of panic they drive off, leaving the other person behind. Next is Russell's story, which is 184 days into the apocalypse. In Russell's story we see him trying to get to Statesboro to find his gran. On his way there he meets a truck driver, the same one from Wyatt's story. The truck driver's name is Nate and he offers to drive Russell to Statesboro. It isn't long until you notice that Nate isn't the most pleasant person to be around. Anyway, on their journey they stop at a gas station, and while they're there they get shot at. They eventually sneak up on the sniper that's been shooting at them, and Russell realizes it's an old couple that seem to recognize Nate. Nate denies being there, and the player is left with the decision of whether they want to stay with Nate or go off on their own. Next we have Shell and Becca, whose story is 236 days in. We see that Shell and Becca seem to be doing better than the other survivors, and as they are a part of a group and are pretty protected, but in usual Walking Dead fashion it doesn't last. A survivor sneaks into their camp, which is the gas station which has appeared in every story. Anyway, the leader of Shell's group, Roman, does a vote to decide what to do with the survivor. Should they kill him, or should they let him go? The deciding vote is given to Shell, and you as the player make the decision. After the decision is made, we then skip forward to 259 days into the apocalypse. Since the break-in that happened to the group, everyone has become a bit more unstable. It's even gotten to the point where a friend of Shell, whose name is Stephanie, even tries stealing supplies and going off on her own. Roman tells this to Shell and says that Shell is the one that will have to pull the trigger this time. It is then left up to the player on whether they want to kill Stephanie or take Becca and get the fuck out of this group. Next, we see Tavia, who is 400 days into the apocalypse. She's been looking at the pictures of all these survivors and goes looking for them. She finds them camped out not too far from the gas station and gives them a choice. They can either come with her to a community that she is a part of or stay behind. Depending on the choices you made up to this point and the words you use as Tavia to convince them, the characters will decide whether they will stay or go. All except Bonnie anyway, because she comes no matter what. And this is kind of like the main reason I'm not talking about Bonnie in this video, because she's almost a different subject for a different day, but I'll get into that a bit more later. Anyway, that is pretty much their story. Now let's talk about the last scenes. Well, when Season 2 of Telltale's The Walking Dead came out, we didn't really see any of the 400 Days characters in the first episode. It wasn't until episode 2 where we saw Bonnie. And once the characters showed up at the community in episode 3, the community that Tavia was a part of, we of course started seeing the characters. First we saw Tavia, then we saw Shell and Becca, then we saw Wyatt, then Vince, and then Russell. I think in that order. Anyway, they didn't really add much to the episode besides Tavia, of course, because she has you doing jobs and stuff, but the other characters are really just relegated to cameos, basically just not really saying much, and that is like the last time you see them. Now, of course, you didn't spend too much time in House Hardware, which is the name of the community the 400 Days characters went to, because Clementine and her group, who you play as in Season 2, you play as Clementine, they escape House Hardware at the end of episode 3 while the place is being attacked by a herd. And later on in episode 5 of Season 2, if you sided with the character of Jane, Clementine and Jane, along with AJ, come back to House Hardware and the place is pretty much abandoned. Now, we also see House Hardware in Season 3 of The Walking Dead, episodes 1 and 4 in flashbacks, but again, the place is pretty much abandoned, and since then we haven't heard anything from the 400 Days characters. Now, one of the main things I want to talk about right now is why didn't I talk about Bonnie in this video. I'll give my full explanation. Because her character went with Tavia no matter what, because there was less choices that Telltale had to work around, Bonnie could be more involved in the story because she wasn't determinant. She wasn't a character that could possibly show up. She was going to appear in everybody's playthrough. Maybe they shouldn't have made the characters showing, deciding to go with Tavia, optional. They should have come with her no matter what. Then we could have gotten more of the 400 Days characters, but I guess that's really a different topic. Talking about the implementation of the 400 Days characters and the overall retrospective on how really the importance of 400 Days in the overall story. Anyway, so I didn't talk about Bonnie because of course she does become a main part of Clementine's group in the game, and two things happen to her at the end of the game. Either she dies in episode 5 along with Luke, or she betrays you a second time along with Mike and Arvo, and they leave. Really, Arvo, Bonnie, and Mike are really more of a different topic for a different day, and they could really take up their own video. So that's why I didn't talk about Bonnie. Anyway, as for 400 Days, this was not the last time 400 Days was referenced in the series, as in the final episode of Telltale's The Walking Dead, Season 4, Episode 4, Take Us Back, in the flashback scene where Clementine goes to McCarroll Ranch, she runs into and kills the character of Eddie. So there was at least one more loose end Telltale did wrap up before ending off the series. So hey, at least one character got closure, because if he didn't, he easily would have been on this video too. Or maybe I could have just made a whole separate videos for like side characters like Leland and Danny or Justin, but really, like, I just wanted to talk about like more of the main characters. I know you don't play as Becca, but she is pretty much a main character. Anyway, so that is pretty much all that has been done with the 400 Days characters, and now it's time for possible reappearance and theories. Now, because Telltale's The Walking Dead has multiple choices, and the characters of 400 Days could either be one of two things. They either stayed at the camp from 400 Days, or they went to House Hardware in Season 2. Bringing these characters back would be so fucking tricky because of all the choices involved. Really, the only way I could ever see them giving closure on these characters without just saying it in an interview is maybe doing a mini-series, kind of like what they did with The Walking Dead Michonne. In this mini-series, we could maybe follow Tavia, or Tavia along with the people that the 400 Days characters that actually came to House Hardware with her, and maybe they could try going back to the gas station from 400 Days, as that's like really one of the only places they know about. Maybe Tavia, you know, like maybe the 400 Days characters are like, oh, we actually have supplies there, maybe we can go back and see if there's anything around. And if they go back there, maybe they could reconnect with any of the characters. Like, let's say if you play through 400 Days, in your playthrough, Wyatt and Russell went to House Hardware, but Vince, Shell, and Becca stayed behind. Well, let's say Tavia, Russell, and Wyatt, along with any surviving House Hardware member, goes back to this camp, and they run into Vince, Shell, and Becca. Now, it would be a stretch to have them all reconnect again, but really that's the only thing you could do, is have them all reconnect. Maybe have you play as Tavia for the series, and maybe the whole goal of the series is after the events of Season 2, Episode 3 and Episode 4, when House Hardware got overrun, we follow the characters as they're trying to find a new group. Or not really a new group, but a new community to set up. And, you know, along the way, characters can die, and maybe by the end of the series we see the characters finally find the community, and we can end it off there, basically saying, well, here's the thing, all the characters you were playing as through this that you kept alive, they found a home and they're safe. Really, that's the only thing I can imagine them doing with that. That would be pretty satisfying, because it would at least give 400 Days a bit more meaning. Because nowadays, if you tried advertising 400 days to someone, it's disappointing because 400 days in the grand scheme of things did not mean much. It really just gave you backstory on Bonnie and that's it. A character a lot of the fan base don't like because she's a snake. Like, she fucks over your character twice. So, like, at this point in time, I don't see a huge demand for giving resolution on the 400 days characters. However, there are 400 days fans out there, and this is something the Still Not Bitten team and Skybound could eventually bring up in the future. I mean, when you think about it, like, who thought they would have brought Eddie back in the final episode? No one. Who knows, we could see these characters pop up again. Anyway, that's pretty much all I gotta say on the 400 Days characters. Me personally, I loved 400 Days. I thought the characters in it were pretty interesting. I would say my favorite was probably Vince. I just thought his character was pretty cool. And I know, I just wish we got to know more about these characters. Like, did Russell just give up his search to get to Statesboro? Did Wyatt just eventually give up looking for Eddie? What was the deal with Vince's brother? I just would have liked a bit more with these characters, because I really think in retrospect Telltale shouldn't have had the whole choice thing for the ending, and these characters should have came with Tavia no matter what, and they should have made up the main cast of season 2 along with the cabin survivors. Imagine we could have had more deaths in season 2, like maybe, I don't know, when you're escaping House Hardware in episode 3, maybe Becca is eaten by the walkers, Shell starts freaking out, she starts getting eaten, maybe Wyatt dies in it at the beginning of episode 4 in the herd, maybe he's like shot by a stray bullet through the head, maybe Russell dies midway through episode 4, and then maybe in the gunfight at the end of episode 4, instead of at the start of episode 5, none of our group having been killed in the gunfight, why not just have like Vince got killed in the gunfight? That way at least there was a casualty in the gun battle at the end of the 4th episode. I don't know, something like that. Maybe you could have even killed Tavia off there as well. Although I don't really see if Tavia and the 400 Days would want to come with Clem's group, because they were responsible for their leader's death, and they were also responsible for getting the community more fucked over because of all the noise they made from the announcement speaker. Anyway, that's pretty much all there is to say on the 400 Days characters. I hope you enjoyed the Missing Survivors episode 4. I'm sorry it's been such a long time since I've had a Missing Survivors episode. I was originally going to have this be gameplay footage for the most part instead of images, but I just thought, like, the main reason I went with images over gameplay footage is because, the episode itself isn't around an hour and a half long, and I would only be able to use about 10 minutes of footage, and I could get the same point across in images, and I just thought a lot of the recording would just go to waste, and I would just be like, I don't want to say wasting my time, because I do like 400 Days, I still like playing it. And maybe one of these days I might play through all the Telltale games on my channel, because I just love these games so much. But I just thought I'll go with the images. I did use some gameplay footage at the beginning of the video, but I guess this is more uniformed with the other Missing Survivors episode, as those don't use clips from the episodes or webisodes. Anyway, this video is over 20 minutes long and it's going on too long now. Thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.